Going to visit Grandma and Grandpa, what would you prefer to take with you as a gift? A knife? Gloves? A hammer? Maybe cable ties or bolt cutters? Today's story happened in Craigmore, a residential suburb in northern Adelaide, South Australia. In the first week of August 2016, several people living in this area noticed that one of their neighbors had disappeared. Fresh newspapers gradually filled all the free space in front of his door, one after another. The greatest concern was caused by the fact that the missing neighbor was a lonely elderly man. Worried neighbors approached the unexpectedly empty house and knocked on the door. Maybe the owner was sick and needed medicine? Or did he fall down the stairs unsuccessfully and couldn't reach the phone to call for help? The thoughts were different, but they all suddenly evaporated when the front door of the house turned out to be unlocked. Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. This was very suspicious because in the last months before his disappearance, the man was a staunch advocate of security. Recently, he even called the police because of a strange car that was parked nearby, and he reinforced his fence because it seemed to him that someone was trying to break into his backyard. When the neighbors entered inside, it immediately became clear that something terrible had happened there. Things were scattered in disarray, cabinets were open, drawers were pulled out. It gave the impression that someone was searching for something in the house. But the most shocking was the bloody trail leading to the kitchen. It was there on the floor that the owner of the house lay. He was dead. The wounds on his body indicated that the man had been stabbed several times with a knife, and next to the body lay a blood-stained napkin. This man was 81-year-old Robert Whitwell, described as a kind, gentle person who wouldn't hurt a fly. Robert was a true gentleman, balanced, friendly, always ready to lend a hand. Many neighbors knew and loved him. He walked in his unchanging suit, never argued with anyone or raised his voice, but always tried to do the right thing. Whitwell was a very independent elderly man, the best version of a husband, brother, father, and grandfather. Robert was always close to his family. They gathered together for Christmas and birthdays, constantly called each other, and took an active part in each other's lives. At the time of his death, Robert was still married. He treated his wife like a queen, but lately his spouse lived in a nursing home. The woman suffered from senile dementia and needed medical care. Robert visited her every day at the same time. He constantly held his wife's hand, combed her hair, and told her about how happy they were in their youth. Besides his wife, Robert Whitwell adored his grandchildren, although they lived far from him. When Ryan and Britney first came into the world, Grandpa wouldn't let them out of his arms. In all family photos, Robert tenderly hugged his grandson and granddaughter and constantly waited for them to come visit him. Even when his grandchildren became adults, he continued to treat them with the same warmth and love. A couple of months before the tragedy, grandson Ryan came to see his grandfather, and they went out to dinner at a cafe. Robert proudly told the entire staff of the establishment that this was his grandson. In general, Robert Whitwell was a sweet, attentive person who was brutally deprived of his life in his own home. But who could the elderly man have crossed paths with? Whose hand rose against the 81-year-old homeowner? Was this an unsuccessful robbery, or was the reason for the attack much worse? It was precisely these questions that the police had to answer, and it would take only 3 weeks before they got the answers. The motive for the crime was money and someone's greed. Simply, someone learned that Robert kept a fairly large sum in his house and decided that this money was worth more than Robert's life. So who disregarded the life of this wonderful person? The answer to this question shocked and outraged most people who heard about this case. And all because one of the 3 arrested was 19-year-old Britney Jade Dwyer, Robert Whitwell's beloved granddaughter. Britney had been a tomboy since childhood and knew how to stand up for her opinion. The girl loved adventures. Together with her brother Ryan, she spent a lot of time in the company of boys, neglecting the society of girls. Over the years, the cheerful child gradually turned into a difficult teenager, caught up in the dark side of life and prone to violence, using prohibited drugs, and causing herself harm. Britney was interested in cemeteries, weapons, and similar things. Most likely, Britney was a deeply unhappy person. Otherwise, how to explain her desire to hurt herself? When her mother Tanya learned about her daughter's problems, she took the girl to a psychologist. The woman didn't want her child to suffer, but judging by everything, the visits to the doctor didn't help much. But at one of the sessions, Britney met and befriended a girl named Shelby. It was from her new friend that Britney caught an interest in the dark side of life. Their correspondence was filled with discussions about crimes. The girls loved horror movies and wrote about how they would go around slitting people's throats. They often hung out at rave parties and arranged bloody showdowns there. Later, Shelby claimed that all their conversations in the messenger were just a joke. But considering what happened to Robert Whitwell, it hardly resembled empty chatter. In fact, Britney wasn't always like that. She had a good, loving family, decent upbringing, proper education, a fairly secure life. At one time, she even wanted to become a police officer. But then Britney realized that she couldn't cope with her aggression and anger. And the intention to get a police badge was pushed to the very end of the wish list. Moreover, Britney's school grades dropped significantly after she made friends with Shelby. The girls became best friends and spent a lot of time together. They drove around the area in a car, went to the beach, and looked for entertainment. At first, everything looked like ordinary teenage friendship. But over time, the alliance of the two girls turned into something more sinister. As she got older, Britney moved out of the family home and settled separately. The lack of parental control led to her starting to abuse prohibited drugs and falling into serious addiction. Naturally, there wasn't enough money, and the girl racked her brains over where to get it. In May 2016, when Britney visited her grandfather with her mother, she became an accidental witness to a conversation between Tanya and Robert. The elderly man confessed to his daughter that he kept all his savings in the amount of $110,000 in cash on the premises of the house. Tanya was very surprised and tried to convince her father that this was dangerous. After all, someone could break into the house, steal the money, and harm Robert himself. But the elderly father just waved his hand with the words, "Who needs that?" Neither Robert nor Tanya saw that Britney had been standing in the hallway the whole time and eavesdropping. It never even occurred to them that the potential threat of robbery could come from the granddaughter. Returning home, the girl shared the information with her best friend Shelby, and together they decided to rob Robert Whitwell, Britney's grandfather. The friends lived in Brisbane, and Robert in Adelaide. The distance between Brisbane and Adelaide was 1,601 kilometers in a straight line and about 2,000 kilometers by road, so it was necessary to choose the right time and prepare thoroughly to steal the money unnoticed. According to the girls, they didn't plan to steal all the savings, but just wanted to take a little cash, hoping that Robert wouldn't even notice the loss. And even more so, the friends weren't going to harm the elderly man. But in Britney's bag, which she took on the trip, there was a knife, gloves, and cable ties. A strange set of items if you're going to visit your beloved grandfather. First, the conspirators decided to follow Robert and his house to scout the situation, find out where and when he goes out. At some point, Shelby got tired of sitting in the car, and she went out to walk around the neighborhood. Britney couldn't do the same because her grandfather would surely notice her. Shelby was walking leisurely near Witwell's house when Robert came out onto the street. Seeing a young girl on the road, the man smiled friendly and greeted her, although they weren't acquainted. After this fleeting meeting, Shelby sent Britney a message, "Oh my God, he's so cute," to which Robert's granddaughter replied that her grandfather was indeed very cute, but Shelby shouldn't get attached to him because he might have to die. Anyway, after Mr. Witwell left the house, Britney and Shelby decided to take advantage of the chance and sneak onto his property through the backyard. They found a wooden box, leaned it against the fence, and tried to climb over. But then, the neighbor's dog barked, attracting the attention of its owner. In the end, the thieves scratched all their legs and arms and got so scared, that they ran away empty-handed. After the failed attempt to climb over the fence, Shelby completely refused to participate in the dubious event. She didn't want to come back and repeat it again. So the next time Britney returned to Adelaide, it wasn't with Shelby. It was another friend, a girl named Bernadette Burns. Bernadette was 21 years old, and her life went downhill after she lost custody of her little daughter, whom she gave birth to at 17. Like Britney, Bernadette became addicted to prohibited drugs and desperately needed money to satisfy her addiction. It was Bernadette who, several months after the first robbery attempt, went with Britney back to Adelaide. But this time, the plans were not just to commit a burglary. The plan was to commit a murder. The girls drove a long way to Adelaide, where Robert lived. Britney prepared more thoroughly for the crime. Now in her bag were bolt cutters, metal scissors, a hammer, gloves, cable ties, and a knife. At first, the conspirators wanted to enter Britney's grandfather's house together, but then Bernadette, when she learned what exactly was supposed to happen there, decided to stay in the car so as not to become an accomplice to the attack. She simply played the role of driver. Britney went to Robert, had breakfast, and settled on the couch with her grandfather, looking through an album of family photos. The helpless, lonely man was so happy about the unexpected visit from his granddaughter that he couldn't hold back his emotions. He showed her old photos with such naivety, where Britney and Ryan were still little. He talked about his wife and her well-being. He recalled happy moments from his youth. Robert couldn't even imagine with what purpose his beloved granddaughter had come to Adelaide. During this conversation, Britney lost her composure, apparently feeling guilty. She even wrote to Bernadette in the messenger that she probably wouldn't be able to do what they had planned. But her friend, instead of supporting the sensible thought, replied to Britney with a message urging her to calm down and get it over with. After all, they had driven a long way and spent a ton of money on gas. Besides, Britney's mom would surely find out about this strange visit and start asking questions. 10 minutes after Bernadette's message, Britney told her grandfather that it was time for her to go. Robert got up from the couch to see his granddaughter out. But as soon as they approached the door, the girl turned around, pulled out the knife she had brought with her, and stabbed her grandfather in the throat. The man clearly didn't expect such betrayal and couldn't believe that the girl he loved so much wished him dead. Robert stepped back, extended his arms, and placed them on Britney's shoulders, as if asking what was happening. But instead of an answer, he received a couple more knife stabs to the chest and neck. And then something happened that defies any description. The 81-year-old Robert Whitwell staggered heavily to the kitchen. He took a napkin and started applying it to his neck, trying to stop the blood. His granddaughter, Britney, helped him sit at the kitchen table, and she herself started washing the dishes. She washed all the cups and spoons, and then the knife with which she had attacked her grandfather. Britney deliberately busied herself with chores to buy time. When she finished washing the dishes, Robert was gone. The man died from the knife wounds inflicted by his own granddaughter. Now his lifeless body lay on the floor, and next to it lay the napkin he had been using to press the wound. Britney wrote to Bernadette a message with the words, "All done, dude." And all this was done for the sake of money that the girls didn't even get. The friends searched the entire house but found nothing. Bernadette panicked that one of the neighbors would hear the noise, call the police, and arrest them. That's why the girls left Robert's house, taking with them only $1,000 that were in his wallet, a few coins, and 2 digital cameras. They decided that the grandfather had made up the story about the accumulated savings and left the house. The police discovered Robert Whitwell's body 3 days later, when worried neighbors contacted the emergency service. During the search of the house, investigators found $13,000, and another $98,000 were hidden in the shed. After the news of the crime committed in the home of a lonely elderly person became public, Britney learned that her grandfather did have the money. She sent Bernadette angry messages and reproached her for not letting her properly finish the search in her grandfather's house. That's how indifferent and heartless Britney turned out to be, the 19-year-old girl who killed her own grandfather. Instead of regretting what happened, she was still thinking about the money. While the investigation was ongoing, Britney behaved like an ordinary teenager upset by the sudden death of a loved one. When her mother Tanya first told her daughter that Robert had died as a result of an unsuccessful robbery, Britney couldn't hold back and burst into hysterical tears. She pretended to be shocked by this tragic news. Tanya asked her daughter to go with her to Adelaide to figure everything out. When Britney appeared at her mom's house, the girl looked terrible, as if she hadn't showered for a whole week and hadn't even combed her hair. Most likely, that's how it was. But at that time, no one in the family paid attention to her appearance. They had more important concerns. They needed to catch the plane. That same day, Tanya, Ryan, and Britney went to Adelaide. Arriving at the place, they found that police cars were still parked along the street where Robert lived, and his house was cordoned off with tape marking the crime scene. Seeing all this, Britney couldn't hold back. She had a strong emotional breakdown, and her mother even had to calm her down. But strangely, when the family wasn't around and Britney was on the street alone, she didn't look upset at all. The girl sat near her grandfather's house, buried in her phone, as if just waiting for it all to end. It was clearly visible that Britney was putting on a show in front of her relatives. Meanwhile, Robert's daughter, Tanya, and grandson, Ryan, walked through the empty house, sorting through things and with pain in their hearts imagining what Robert had been doing the day before his death. They found a birthday card for grandson Ryan on the table, which the grandfather had signed and was going to send. His laptop was there too, open to viewing photos. From the monitor, Robert's wife, who was in the nursing home at the time, looked at the relatives. All these days, Britney behaved as if she was grieving with everyone. She rode in the car with her brother and talked about how she couldn't come to terms with her grandfather's death. She sobbed when the whole family grieved, but in reality, the girl was just playing a role. The only thing that changed in her behavior was that Britney smoked one cigarette after another a lot, but everyone just attributed it to stress. Nevertheless, Britney handled her true emotions quite skillfully, but her friend felt much worse. Bernadette couldn't keep the terrible secret to herself and shared it with her roommate. She told her that the purpose of the trip to Adelaide was to rob Britney's grandfather, but then everything got out of control. Even before they left Brisbane, Britney joked that she was going to kill her grandfather. Bernadette didn't believe her, deciding that she was joking. Already sitting in the car in front of Robert's house, the friends started arguing about whether it was worth committing the crime at all. They agreed that they needed at least to get back the money they spent on the trip. It was with that intention that Britney entered her grandfather's house, and then she took and used the knife she had brought with her. Having told all this to her roommate, Bernadette sobbed uncontrollably. Whether these were tears from guilt or from fear that sooner or later you have to pay with freedom for any crime is unknown. Bernadette also gave away her involvement in the murder by posting on social media. The story of my life. I knew it was better not to do it, but I did it anyway. She posted this entry just a few hours after participating in the murder of Robert Whitwell. For some time, the friends managed to hide their crimes. Both girls tried to behave as inconspicuously as possible, so as not to attract the police's attention. After the confession, Bernadette asked her roommate not to tell anyone about what they had done. But it's not for nothing that they say if two people know a secret, it's no longer a secret. The roommate immediately shared the terrible secret with her friend, and she blabbed to someone else, and so on down the chain. 3 weeks after Robert Whitwell's death, an anonymous call led the police to Britney, Bernadette, and Shelby. All 3 girls were arrested. Information about who turned them in to the authorities was not disclosed. But there were many people who knew what happened, so any of them could have reported the friends to the police. After the arrest of the suspects, the police had to inform Tanya, Robert Whitwell's daughter, that Britney, along with 2 friends, was arrested for the murder of her father. When the woman learned about this, she was in shock and didn't immediately realize what had happened. Tanya was sure that it was some mistake, and Britney would be released soon. But the police had a lot of evidence, including the mobile phone's GPS navigator and about 1,000 text messages exchanged between Britney, Bernadette, and Shelby. Only after reading the messages between the friends, in which the details of the attack and robbery were discussed, did Tanya finally feel the full horror of the situation. She herself had brought into this world a monster who raised a hand against a loved one. The grief-stricken mother couldn't understand where she had made a mistake, what warning signs she had missed in raising her daughter. Every morning, Tanya woke up in a sweat and hoped that the nightmare would end soon. But it didn't end because it was the harsh reality of her life. Together with her son Ryan, Tanya tried to meet and talk with Britney, deep down still hoping that her daughter had nothing to do with it. But the girl's lawyer told them that Britney didn't want to talk to them. For several months, the family was in confusion, without answers to the questions tormenting them. The relatives still didn't fully believe that Britney had really taken Robert Whitwell's life until the girl finally confessed in court herself. At the moment of truth, the mother and brother didn't side with the criminal. They were shocked and couldn't forgive the betrayal, unlike Bernadette's family. The parents of Britney's friend didn't consider her responsible for the elderly man's death. They blamed everything on prohibited drugs, believing that it was the harmful addiction that pushed Bernadette to the crime, as if it wasn't her choice. After the news of the murder of 81-year-old Robert Whitwell became public, Australia was shocked. This case made headlines in newspapers across the country and caused a storm of condemnations. At the trial, all three girls pleaded guilty. To mitigate the sentence, Britney's lawyer tried to blame everything on American Horror Story, the TV series that allegedly inspired the girl to murder her grandfather. By the way, that's how this crime was called in news publications. But as the hero of one of the horrors said, movies don't create psychopaths. Movies make psychopaths more selective. Britney, in her defense, accused her grandfather of abuse. This claim came out of nowhere. It appeared only after talking with the lawyer. Tanya and Ryan vehemently denied that this had ever taken place. Not only did Britney take her grandfather's life, but even after his death, she tried to tarnish his honest name and blacken his memory. The girl herself apparently didn't realize how terrible this was. In the end, Britney Dwyer was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 21 years. Already after the trial, through her lawyer, Britney conveyed words of apology. But most likely, what upset her was not her grandfather's death and the family's grief, but her own ruined life. Bernadette's lawyer emphasized that she didn't plan the murder and wasn't even present in the house when Britney attacked Robert. Bernadette was presented in court not as a cold-blooded killer, but as a young woman suffering from addiction to prohibited substances who got into a bad situation. Nevertheless, the judge sentenced her to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 13.5 years. Shelby received the smallest sentence because their trip with Britney to Adelaide ended in complete failure. Shelby also stated that she didn't tell anyone about it because she didn't believe in the seriousness of Britney's intentions, considering it a joke. In the end, the judge issued a sentence of 17 months of suspended imprisonment. The consequences of Robert Whitwell's tragic death were devastating. His wife, who was in the nursing home, followed her husband. Tanya lost not only her father, but also her daughter, whom she loved very much. The woman couldn't forgive Britney her cruelty. Robert's brother, Jeffrey, lost not only a loved one. Now he has to live with the realization that he comforted his niece Britney at the funeral, who took his brother's life. Complex relationships within the family turned into a tragedy that left indelible consequences for all participants. Although Robert's relatives were satisfied with the sentence, it won't return to them that sense of wholeness, the security of family ties, and will forever leave their hearts broken by betrayal. They will have to carry the burden of responsibility for Britney Dwyer's act for the rest of their lives. Now Tanya faces a difficult task. Should she forgive her beloved daughter for taking away her loved one? Help this channel grow. Like the video, try the new hype feature, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you.